the American people stand firm in the faith which has inspired this nation from the beginning. We believe that all men have a right to equal justice under law and equal opportunity to share in the common good. We believe that all men have the right to freedom of thought and expression. We believe that all men are created equal because they are created in the image of God. From this faith, we will not be moved.
Hello and welcome to the Freedom of Thought podcast. I am your host, Paladino Joey, or Joey Awajan. Freedom of Thought is available on all of your favorite podcasting apps. I thank each and every one of you once and always for downloading and listening to this show. It is a great pleasure to be back on board with you once again today, as I'm going to kind of go into, literally, freedom of thought, kind of go into something a little different, you could say, a little different, something that, it fits it kind of fits the criteria of the show. Maybe some of you like this type of thing, some of you don't. At the same time, again, I'm going to reiterate that ghosts, generally speaking, you're probably not talking to your grandmother. You're probably not talking to this president or that president or anybody else. But at the same time, I guess it's interesting stuff to talk about at the very least. I think that this kind of stuff has happened and is happening at times as well. So a little bit of paranormal conversation going into today's episode. Again, I guess it's freedom of thought. So, what's really going on? So, since we're heading into the time of the year where you start to see lilacs popping up, at least in this part of the country, maybe south of here, because I live in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, of course, Golden Valley, to be specific, very close to Minneapolis, where lilacs are going to start blooming soon. The buds are starting to show. You're starting to see colors on the plants and such, and you think of the Lincoln lilacs. That's what kind of gave me the thought process. I guess it's Lincoln lilacs, probably the best one, the most common, but the best lilacs, the kind of violet purple ones that you see everywhere, at least around here. Other parts of the country, maybe South Dakota, maybe Nebraska, wherever. But we're going to talk about a subject that not that long ago I didn't realize was going on and how common it was, but it's like, holy cow. So I guess not long after Abraham Lincoln's death, I believe his wife contacted some kind of medium or something, and she called up like a Abe Lincoln spirit or something creepy like that. So that's the story from what I heard. At least my mom, I think, told me that. But then little did we know what has been going on pretty much ever since, or at least up until the 1960s or so, when supposedly an exorcist came and did something about that. So to the point, Lincoln's ghost, to think that Lincoln's ghost was haunting the White House for, years and years and years, for generations. Lincoln's ghost. So we're going to refer to Wikipedia here once again, as I always like to cite my sources. It's just being honest and fair. You can't just say I got all this information from myself. I just knew it. I know. No, I don't know it. You have to cite your source. Otherwise, you're not being an honest media person, basically. So the ghost of U.S. President Abraham Lincoln, also known as the White House ghost, is said to have haunted the White House since Lincoln's assassination in 1865. Lincoln's ghost has also been said to haunt many of his former residencies in Springfield, Illinois, including his former law office. So again, another president that was a lawyer once upon a time. So, of the several stories about the ghosts of former presidents of the United States revisiting the White House, Lincoln's ghost is perhaps the most common and popular. First Lady Grace Coolidge, that would be like Calvin Coolidge's wife, Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, that was an interesting one, and President Theodore Roosevelt are among those claimed to have stated they saw Lincoln's ghost in the White House. So as for the reported apparitions and such, where's the list? Or I guess this is the list. It just looks different from what I was looking at yesterday. So here we go. The White House most famous apparition is that of Abraham Lincoln, of course. The first person reported to have actually seen Lincoln's spirit was First Lady Grace Coolidge, who said she saw the ghost of Lincoln standing at a window in the Yellow Oval Room staring out at the Potomac in 1927. So interesting that it would be that long, but I'm sure there were others. It's just that was a famous one, I guess. Perhaps the most famous, everything's the most famous, I guess. Perhaps the most famous incident was in 1942 when Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands allegedly heard footsteps outside her White House bedroom and answered a knock at the door only to see Lincoln in frock coat and top hat standing in front of her. She promptly fainted. Here's my favorite one. British Prime Minister, that is, Winston Churchill, loved to retire late. He retired late, take a long hot bath while drinking a scotch and smoke a cigar and relax. There is an account that on this occasion he climbed out of the bath and naked, but for a cigar, walked into the adjoining bedroom. He was startled to see Lincoln standing by the fireplace in the room, leaning on the mantel. Churchill, always quick on the uptake, simply took his cigar out of his mouth, tapped the ash off at the end of the cigar, and said, "Good evening, Mr. President. You seem to have me at a disadvantage." Lincoln smiled softly, as if laughing, and disappeared. Interesting. At least the apparition of Lincoln, anyway. Not Lincoln himself, at least I don't think so. President Theodore Roosevelt. Presidential daughter, Maureen Reagan, her husband Dennis C. Revel, and a number of staff members of the Franklin D. Roosevelt administration all claimed to have seen Lincoln's spirit. On one occasion, FDR's personal valet ran screaming from the White House, claiming he had seen Lincoln's ghost. Eleanor Roosevelt never admitted to have seen Lincoln's ghost, but did say that she felt his presence repeatedly throughout the White House. She also said that the Roosevelt family dog Fella would sometimes bark for no reason at what she felt was Lincoln's ghost. President Dwight Eisenhower's press secretary, James Haggerty, and Liz Carpenter, press secretary to First Lady Lady Bird Johnson, both said they felt Lincoln's presence many times. The former president's footsteps are also said to be heard in the hall outside the Lincoln bedroom. Lillian Rogers Parks stated in her 1961 autobiography, My 30 Years Backstairs at the White House, that she had heard them. Interesting. Margaret Truman, daughter of President Harry S. Truman, who you actually hear at the introduction of every episode of Freedom of Thought. That is Harry Truman, by the way, just so you know. So that's the daughter, said she heard a specter rapping at the door of the Lincoln bedroom when she stayed there and believed it was Lincoln. President Truman himself was once awakened by raps at the door while spending the night at the Lincoln bedroom. Yes, that's one thing that's been heard a lot about Abraham Lincoln, or this apparition knocking on doors a lot in the White House. Several unnamed eyewitnesses have claimed to have seen the shade of Abraham Lincoln actually lying down in the bed in the Abraham Lincoln bedroom, which was used as a meeting room at the time of his administration. And while others have seen Lincoln sit on the edge of the bed and put his boots on. The most famous eyewitness to the latter was Mary Ebbin, Eleanor Roosevelt's secretary, who saw Lincoln pulling on his boots, after which she ran screaming from the room. Lincoln's ghost was reportedly seen outside of the White House as well. In Loudonville, New York, Lincoln's ghost was said to haunt a house that was owned by a woman who was present at Ford's Theater when Lincoln was shot by John Wilkes Booth. Other Lincoln hauntings included his grave in Springfield, Illinois, a portrait of Mary Todd Lincoln, and a phantom train on nights in April along the same path his funeral train followed from Washington, D.C. to Springfield. Yep, the funeral train. Yep, remember? Yeah, he went across the country. Abraham Lincoln, of course. The last reported sighting of Lincoln's ghost was in the early 1980s when Tony Savoy, White House operations foreman, came into the White House and saw Lincoln sitting in a chair at the top of some stairs. So, wouldn't that just be weird? Another one, though, as well. Willie Lincoln died in the White House during his father's presidency. He was only 11 years old, so we'll get to that quick. Abraham Lincoln is not the only Lincoln ghost witnesses claim to have seen in the White House. Willie Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's 11-year-old son, died in the White House of typhoid. Yep, on February 20th, 1862, and there's a little image of him. Willie Lincoln's ghost was first reported to have been seen in the White House by staff members of the Grant administration. That'd be Ulysses S. Grant in the 1870s, but reports have been made as recently as the 1960s. President Lyndon Baines Johnson's college-age daughter, Linda, okay, that wasn't that hard. Linda Bird Johnson Robb, it's just spelled different, claims to have seen the ghost and talked to them. Talked to the ghosts. Yikes. That's interesting. So there's also other interesting ones as well out there, like George Washington, supposedly. Not in the White House, though, but like there's a couple of them, like during the Civil War, I guess. Supposedly, all of a sudden, there was like Washington on a horse with his, his attire from like the 1700s Revolutionary War era, like dressed like General George Washington, guiding the troops in what direction to go, and it ended up being the right way and such. It ended up being the right decision. Also to scare off some like protesters, I think that were, being a huge problem. There were rioters, I guess, because riots happened back in the 1800s as well. So in the 1800s, when George Washington was no longer alive, they swore it was George Washington. People swore that it was him, and there was one where, he said, "Fix bayonets, charge." George Washington liked to lead these troops that were, around to get rid of these rioters, like get them out of here. They scared them away. They ran away. The other one, again, helped the troops go the correct direction, and I do believe it was the Union troops, not the Confederates. So very interesting to think that president ghostly presidents as well. So I might try to check this out as well. So it's fascinating stuff. Gettysburg. He was supposedly seen at Gettysburg as well, so not long before. That is just the darndest thing when you think about all of that, reports of ghosts and such. So as for the George Washington ghost as well, so this is mostly about Lincoln, but I mean, I could even go deeper into George Washington in the future, but might as well. It's just crazy to think about how they say like George Washington appeared before the 20th Maine Division as they approached Gettysburg. As they approached a fork in the road, they were unsure which direction to take. Suddenly, a very tall, imposing figure wearing a tri-cornered hat on horseback that waved them in the right direction and commanded them to follow him. They say, "Did you know that George Washington is credited by some as helping the Union Army in one of its most decisive engagements at Gettysburg?" Wait a minute, George Washington? He was a general during the Revolutionary War and died in 1799, well before the Civil War. Yet Washington, or rather his ghost, is said to have appeared on the 20th Maine Division as they approached Gettysburg. At first they thought he was a Union general, but they began to scratch their heads that he looked remarkably like George Washington. The horsemen led the Union soldiers to Little Round Top, where they were able to repel the Confederates. It's pretty wild. Absolutely crazy to think about. So, don't know. I don't know what to think about that, other than I have no idea. Could it have been somebody imitating him? But then again, I don't know. I don't think it was. Some people believe that not all of these quote-unquote ghosts are actually demons and familiar spirits and such. I don't know. Stuff like that makes you wonder a little bit, yet at the same time, well, that's why it's freedom of thought. It's kind of up to you, I guess, to debate. Most, I would say, like, over 90% of them are evil, if not 100, are just evil and deceptive and all of that. It's not your grandmother. It's not this. It's not that. As for that one, I don't know. I don't know. Who knows? It's very strange to think about. Could it have been an angel with kind of taking on a Washington type appearance? I'm not sure. As for the Lincoln one, I think that's probably a familiar spirit. Yes. I mean, what good was he doing? What good was the Abe Lincoln ghost really doing? This Washington one is very interesting, and it puts things up for debate a little bit because he helped them. So I don't know. Could it have been an angel helping? An angel taking on the form of Washington? Or, I don't know, God allowed Washington to be there for a minute? I have no idea. It's very strange. Or just a regular human being imitating George Washington, but actually being good. I have no idea. It's the darndest thing. So, again, that's why we're open to thought here on freedom of thought. I mean, that's freedom of thought. I'm not going to condemn your thoughts on that for sure. But honestly, when I read that, I was blown away. The Lincoln stuff is interesting and fascinating and, kind of weird and all that. I hope I didn't cover up the microphone here. And again, I am mobile, so it's just the way it is right now. But the Washington one it does bring up debate, and that's kind of why I wanted to include that one on here as well. So I don't know. I don't know what to think, because it certainly didn't hurt them. And I know that some quote unquote ghosts have helped people before. Ghosts or spirits or whatever the heck it is, because I'm not really sure that was George Washington necessarily, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, the Lord works in mysterious ways, and if this spiritual being helped the spiritual being that looked a heck of a lot like George Washington helped the Union troops, I guess. Who knows? Who knows what to say? I don't believe there were any comments. Obviously, there's the Facebook page, facebook.com/Freedom of Thought 1776. Again, I hope you like the logo that I brought up a while back. Instagram, freedom_of_thought 1776. That's the Instagram. So hope to continue to build followers there. I posted a meme where it's Biden pointing at, somebody saying, I'm a complete failure. And you know it. Well, I agree. I also posted Forrest a beautiful path about a week ago. Beautiful, beautiful path with the trees and the path and everything. It looks a lot like the logo of Freedom of Thought. And I was saying, this just screams Freedom of Thought. Unfortunately, nobody commented. So that's a bummer. I wish you did. Say something out there. I know you're out there. I miss hearing from Gerald out of South Dakota. I don't think Ray's happy with me. I don't know, because I don't know. I guess he wanted for him to come on and kind of get his frustrations out a bit at the administration, and I completely agree with his thoughts. I don't know. I just prefer not to have a ton of swearing on the show. I just prefer not to. It's entertaining, but it's I don't know. The swearing is you could probably get your thoughts across without dropping F-bombs and C-bombs and stuff like that. That's all. That was my only point of view. It wasn't any type of a way to be condescending and, or anything like that. So, or be a milquetoast either, because believe me, I'm not thrilled about the direction of the country under a certain current president. I am not thrilled at all with Joe Biden at all. I take Abraham Lincoln or George Washington any day of the week, 10 out of 10 times, 100 out of 100 times, 1,000 out of 1,000 times over Joe Biden. It's a joke. It's just an absolute joke. Or Obama, or really any of the other, radically left presidential candidates that could be out there. So hard pass on that. I'll take Trump back any day of the week as well. Any day of the week, and we'll see what happens with all of that. But thought this might be interesting to go in definitely another direction. Yet another direction, another tentacle of freedom of thought today, talking about some interesting stuff. Final thing we could say, how was it one of the, I think it was it the Roosevelt's dog would be barking at something, like it could see something. Talk is that animals are more sensitive to seeing stuff like that, like apparitions and such. Let me complete this episode with you could call it a semi-creepy story. I've often talked about my cat, Chloe, I guess, on Facebook and other places, but I don't know if I've mentioned her much on this show. Beautiful Bombay cat, black hair, yellow eyes, born in 1990, April 14th, the day Lincoln was shot. Interesting. The day, but, obviously, several years after, I believe it was 135 years after Lincoln was shot, and then was put to sleep on April 2nd, 2007. Okay, so that little introduction is completed. Well, later in Chloe's life, like 2006, 2005, something like that, maybe even early 7, but I think it was before her final year, so to speak. I was going down the stairs. Chloe had just finished eating some kind of snack like meat. We'd give her like meat, like lunch meat or whatever the heck we might have been eating for dinner if there was like a steak or something, because I had been at my parents' house at the time and Chloe was, still around, obviously. I'm going down the stairs and it was like she froze in place and was staring at, I couldn't tell if it was me or something slightly behind me. Slightly behind me. Chloe was, she had the creepiest look in her eyes. And I just asked her, what are you looking at, Chloe? Why are you looking at me like that? And she was just frozen in place, like as if she'd seen a ghost or as if she was a ghost. It was the creepiest look. It was unexplained, but I think she saw something, and I do. And I've long thought that my parents' basement was a little creepy. Like as a little kid, I'd just be down there late at night and just be frozen in fear for some reason, and I didn't know why. I just frozen in fear. And later on, I was toying with this app on your cell phone, where I don't want to get too deep. Well, yeah, I might as well do it. I could talk about it on later episodes as well. But what's it called? Ghost radar or such. A lot of people think it's nonsense, but no, unfortunately, I think it is. I think there's something there. How electronic devices can connect to, they can open doors to things, and it's not a good idea. I shouldn't have done that, and I regret that. And it suddenly started saying like the green door enter, or door green enter. And what do you think is we have down in the basement, or my parents or whatever have in the basement? A green door where you enter from outside, from the garage area. Well, yeah, outside of the garage actually. And then it started saying my name, my dad's name, and my brother's name and stuff. So these are different instances that took place. So I've long kind of felt that there's something funny about that basement. And then all of that happened. Then I felt electricity on my legs. And I asked, what are you doing? And it said experiment. And like the radar was going crazy. So I don't know. Chloe must have seen something. Obviously, there was many years later where I had the app in the phone. Maybe a good 5+ years after, 5 to 7, 8 years after Chloe made that creepy face, and years later had passed away, of course. But that look on her face made me wonder. And it's like, I don't know. And animals see stuff. They do. I've long heard that, where, my friend Marcus used to talk about shadow figures in this really old apartment in Minneapolis, and the cat would always see the stuff at the same time Marcus did. And it's like, okay, well, interesting. So kind of leaving you with that thought, I guess. Freedom of thought, right? So it's interesting conversation. I hope you don't mind me getting into that a little bit. And I strongly suggest against the ghost radar thing, because I think I've heard it's kind of like almost like using a Ouija board. Don't do it. It can open the door to things that can, it can open the door to the wrong place, and you don't want that. Don't do it. Strong advice there. Creepy stuff. So with all of that said, thank you so much for listening. Tell your friends about this show if you could. Don't be afraid to check out the OJ case episode where I talked about a very interesting scenario brought up by private investigator William/Bill Deere, coming out of Texas, where it really, those are the kind of doors you like opening because it's freedom of thought. It really opens your mind a bit to what possibly truly happened on June 12th, 1994. We're coming up on the 30th anniversary of that, so I'll probably have some kind of episode talking about that some more around that time, about a month from now, approximately, about 5 weeks from now. So stay tuned for that. That's probably, 3-4 episodes away, something like that. But again, thank you so much for listening to the show. Tell your friends about it. Join the Facebook page, join the Instagram, interact with me if you could. I'd really appreciate it. Otherwise, thank you so much again for listening. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.